We've thought about people outside our own neighborhoods. I mean, we've been concerned for years, and civilizations in the past have also expressed concern and interest in helping and assisting other civilizations. But if you look back at history, some of you may be historians, it's interesting to see that the extent of civil participation of individuals involving themselves in the larger society has exploded in the last few centuries. I mean, and we've got a lot to thank. We've got internet, we've got telephones, but what it means is that perhaps humankind really isn't at heart basically greedy if we look at the human potential. Yes, there are got international travel. We have lots of reasons for that. Sides of humanity which can pull us down. There are selfish, egotistical elements within us. You know, we're the only ones who have the right to things, but we also have to have the ability, and have exhibited it, to learn to be cooperative and collaborative. Otherwise we wouldn't be here. But we have to do it more. We have to convince our leaders and our politicians that this is the basis of human nature, that we can further develop this. And of course, as was also mentioned, this whole aspect of significant change. Because if you're a child and you're becoming an adult and all you see are thunderstorm clouds, horrible horizons, fear and disaster in front of you, who's going to want to grow up? Of course we're all going to want to run out. I mean, I'm old enough to have been of the generation that, you know, said, let's go out and commit suicide. We're all going to be killed by the atom bomb anyway. And those of us who didn't commit suicide, we all went crazy on drugs, right? And then a few of us went on our mountaintops with our chickens and finally discovered, hey, human nature involves being able not only to hope, but to contribute to the creation of significant change. And then a lot of us came back and decided that it was maybe better to work on expressing our values in our daily actions and in our lives and in our work, rather than give up and become passive people in denial or who have feeling that there is no hope. We were asked to look at what kind of values are the basis for this transition or this transformation into a new culture which is not based on consumerism. And I must admit, some of you have heard me talk before. I'm a teacher and I definitely feel that education is a key. But education in itself, the big word, is nothing unless you look at what's inside of it. And I think the basic point of departure in education for a sustainable future is to look at what values we want to develop in children, in adults, in order to achieve this kind of a society we're talking about. We need to work on empathy. We don't teach empathy in schools. We don't, in families, always encourage and help people understand and develop more than just sympathy. Oh, this poor guy, I feel sorry for you. But to really put ourselves in their shoes. Trust, respect, cooperation, moderation's been mentioned, but also courage and commitment. I could talk a lot about those. We don't have time. I do want to talk very briefly about three things: global solidarity, moderation, and trustworthiness. And there are a lot of things that can be said about those three values, and I'm not being scientific in my presentation of values here, which is because we don't have time. But if we look at the question of global solidarity, I think one of the important aspects of that is the fact that the world today is dominated by the tyranny of the market. We are, as Chiara's poem so clearly indicated, determined very much by the influences around us. And what does that mean in terms of what we want to become, of how society can change? You know, consumer scientists are saying, oh, consumers don't want to, you know, buy ethical products. They don't want to do this because unless it's cheap or available or, you know, convenient, they'll always go for the easy way out. But there is something called principled producers and conscientious consumers who are basing their choices on an understanding of global solidarity, of moderation. And when we get to the question of trustworthiness, the whole aspect of social responsibility, corporate social responsibility, of accountability and transparency are growing. I mean, we don't have time to look at all the standards, at all the criteria that are now popping up and that businesses and governments are voluntarily accepting. There's a whole horde of voluntary codes, of initiatives where people are saying, hey, I'm not greenwashing you. I mean what I say. I can prove it. You know, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. The question is we have to encourage and develop those even further. As I was saying, we are trying to encourage a culture of a non-conformist consumer, because that we have to eat, we have to consume, we have to, you know, have something around us, especially in Norway where we freeze to death, and things like that. So consumption can't go away. It's not a question of not consuming, it's consuming how we're consuming, and consuming in a way that then takes into consideration the consequences of our consumption. It also, as I just mentioned, has to do with the way we produce, with a whole other way about how we use our resources, make our choices, and move forward. I won't go into the 10-year framework because I think Jeff and others have discussed these things, but I think that this holistic approach is important. I don't know how many of you have had teenagers in your family, but you know, sometimes you can get really hung up on the one thing the teenager does. There's no one here with green hair and purple eyes, but you know, when my kids came home and one of them had green hair and, you know, piercing everywhere, I got really hung up on that. And I forgot the whole picture. I forgot that, you know, growing up is about a lot of things at the same time. And I think the world today has to face that we have to deal with the interdisciplinary, cross-cutting issues that are interrelated and interlinked. And we could go into a long discussion of what is needed, focus on research, new definitions, as was mentioned, for growth and prosperity, stronger instruments for governance. I'm a little scared of the definition of green economy that isn't defined yet. I'm looking forward to hearing how it's going to move forward. I think it has to include this social and individual element, the values base, and that we need stronger, stricter standards for social responsibility and the involvement of stakeholders. There are systems and processes that allow us to be more actively included in how production processes occur, and also the stronger emphasis on transformative education. I think I'll hop over this because to finalize what I want to say, we have to build on experience. We have to understand what our daily actions mean to people other places, but that means we also need moral leadership, people who put their values forward. And that's what we ask of young kids when they grow up. Behave yourself. Act like an adult. You know, do something with your life that is constructive and creative and gives hope and insight. And do it. Don't just talk about it. So we aren't going to be complacent. We urgently try to initiate change. And by learning the process, putting it into action, we can recognize that spiritual principles identify the patterns and processes for the development of society, and realize this has to do with your integrity, my integrity, and the integrity of a humanity that's becoming of age. Through the quiet change of individuals, significantly adjusting their lifestyles, as well as the demonstrative change of groups, individuals, politicians, corporate enterprises, ostentatiously translating intentions into actions.